The cards fell like leaves in autumn, and Natalie Summers laid down her third winning hand with steady fingers that belied the racing of her heart. She had beaten the cowboy at poker 3 hands straight, something nobody in Williams, Arizona had managed to do in the 2 years since Bennett Vale had ridden into town. The year was 1883, and the saloon had gone quiet enough to hear the hiss of the oil lamps on the walls. Bennett leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes never leaving hers as he studied the woman who had just cleaned him out of $30 and his pride. His jaw was strong beneath several days of stubble, and there was something dangerous in the way he smiled, like a wolf that had found worthy prey. "What else can you win from me?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Natalie felt every pair of eyes in the Lucky Dollar saloon watching, waiting to see what the schoolteacher from back east would say to the notorious gambler and ranch hand, who had a reputation for being unbeatable at cards and women both. "Your horse," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "One more hand. If I win, I take that black gelding of yours. If you win, you get your money back." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Bennett's horse was legendary, a midnight-colored animal with speed that had won him races from Flagstaff to Prescott. Men had offered him twice what the horse was worth, and he had refused every time, but Bennett did not hesitate. He pushed back his hat, revealing sweat-dampened brown hair, and nodded. "Deal." Natalie's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled the worn deck. She had come to Williams 6 months ago to escape a suffocating life in Philadelphia, where her late father's debts had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a one-way ticket west. The teaching position paid barely enough to rent a room above the general store, but it was hers, earned through her own efforts. She had learned poker from her father during better times, before the drink had taken him, and those skills had helped her survive more than one lean week. She dealt the cards with practiced efficiency. 5-card draw, the most honest game in the West where skill mattered more than luck, though both had their place. Bennett picked up his cards without expression. Natalie gathered hers and felt her stomach drop. A pair of 3s. Nothing else worth mentioning. She kept her face smooth, remembering her father's lessons about tells and timing. "Cards?" she asked. "3," Bennett said, discarding. She dealt him 3 new cards, then looked at her own hand. With careful deliberation, she discarded 3 cards as well, keeping the pair and 1 other card at random. The 3 new cards fell before her. Another 3, and a 7 and a 9, 3 of a kind, not spectacular but decent. Bennett studied his cards for a long moment, then met her eyes. Something flickered in that gaze, something that made her breath catch. "You play like someone who learned from a master." "My father," she said quietly, "before he lost everything. And you think you can win everything back, one hand at a time. I think I can take care of myself." He nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he suspected. Then he laid down his cards. 2 pair jacks and 8s, her 3 3s took the pot. The saloon erupted. Men shouted and slapped tables. Someone laughed in disbelief. But Natalie only saw Bennett, watching as he stood slowly from the table. He was tall, she realized, easily over 6 feet, with the lean strength of a man who spent his days in the saddle. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that sat low on his hips, but it was his eyes that held her, dark and intense and utterly unreadable. "Seems like that black gelding has a new owner," he said. His voice was rough, textured like desert sand. "Come on, I will take you to meet him." She followed him out into the warm September night, her skirts swishing against her boots. The air smelled of dust and sage, so different from the coal smoke and sea salt of Philadelphia. The moon hung fat and yellow over the ponderosa pines that surrounded the town, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Bennett's horse stood tied at the hitching post, a magnificent animal that gleamed like polished obsidian in the moonlight. He untied the reins and held them out to her. His name is Phantom. He is 6 years old, sound in wind and limb, and he has carried me through country that would break most horses. Natalie reached for the reins, and her fingers brushed his. The contact sent a shock through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Why did you bet him if you value him so highly? Bennett was quiet for a moment, still holding the reins even as her hand touched his. Because I wanted to see if you would take the risk. Most people, they play it safe. They would have taken the money and walked away. But you went for something that mattered. And if I had lost, then I would have known you were not who I thought you were. He released the reins into her keeping and stepped back. But you won fair and square. He is yours. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt oddly hollow. I cannot keep him. I have no stable, no way to feed a horse like this on a schoolteacher's wages. Then why did you bet for him? It was a good question, one she had been asking herself even as she made the wager. Because I wanted to win something that could not be bought. Something that had to be earned. Bennett smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. Keep him at the Valley Ranch. I work there as foreman. The owner, Marcus Hendricks, he owes me enough favors that he will not mind boarding one more horse. You can ride out on Sundays, learn to handle him proper. And you would teach me. The question came out before she could stop it. If you want to learn. His eyes held hers. I have a feeling you are the kind of woman who wants to learn everything. She should have said no. Should have sold the horse or given him back or done any number of sensible things. But Natalie had not come west to be sensible. She had come to be free. Sunday then, after church, I will be waiting. She watched him walk away into the darkness, moving with the easy grace of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. Only when he had disappeared did she turn to the horse, running her hand along his warm neck. Phantom huffed softly and nuzzled her shoulder, as if he knew his world had just changed. "What have I gotten myself into?" she whispered. The horse had no answer, but the night seemed full of possibilities. Sunday dawned clear and bright, the September sun already warming the high desert air by the time Natalie left the small white church at the edge of town. Reverend Matthews had preached about the dangers of gambling and loose living, and she had felt the weight of disapproving stares from the other women. News of her poker victory had spread through Williams like wildfire, and the town's opinion was divided between scandalized and impressed. Sarah Chen, the Chinese laundress who had become her only real friend in town, caught her arm as she left. "You really going out to Valley Ranch? I want a horse. I should learn to ride him properly." Sarah's dark eyes sparkled with knowing humor. "You won more than a horse, I think." Bennett Vale, he is a good man. Hard but good. He does not cheat at cards or with women. "I am not interested in him that way," Natalie protested, but even to her own ears it sounded false. "Of course not." Sarah patted her arm. "That is why you changed your dress 3 times this morning. I could hear you through the wall." Natalie felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had indeed changed clothes repeatedly, finally settling on her most practical dress, a dark blue calico that would not show trail dust too badly. She had also, though she would deny it to her dying day, taken extra care with her hair, pinning it up in a way that showed the curve of her neck. "Be careful," Sarah said, more seriously now. "Men like him, they can break your heart without meaning to. My heart is not involved. Not yet." The words followed Natalie as she walked to the livery stable where Phantom had spent the night. The stable boy had clearly been instructed to take excellent care of the horse, because the gelding gleamed from a fresh grooming, his tack polished and ready. "Mr. Vale said to tell you he would meet you at the ranch, miss," the boy said, helping her mount. "Just follow the north road about 3 miles. Cannot miss it." Sitting astride Phantom felt like sitting on thunder about to break. The horse danced beneath her, powerful and barely restrained. She had learned basic riding back east, gentle trots through city parks on docile mares. This was entirely different. "Easy," she murmured, and Phantom's ears flicked back to catch her voice. "We are in this together now." The ride to Valley Ranch took her through country that stole her breath. Ponderosa pines towered overhead, their bark golden in the morning light. Between the trees, she caught glimpses of red rock formations and distant mountains still capped with snow from the previous winter. The air was thin and clean, scented with pine and juniper. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. The ranch appeared suddenly as she crested a rise, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a wide valley. Corrals held horses and cattle, and in the distance, she could see riders working the herds. The main house was built of adobe and timber, solid and weathered, clearly designed to withstand whatever the harsh Arizona climate could throw at it. Bennett stood waiting near the largest corral, and something in Natalie's chest tightened at the sight of him. He had cleaned up since Friday night, his jaw shaved smooth and his dark hair still damp from a recent washing. He wore a clean shirt and denim pants, and his gun belt was absent, though she suspected a weapon was never far from reach out here. "You made good time," he said as she approached. "How did Phantom treat you?" "Like I was made of glass and might shatter at any moment." She dismounted, grateful when her legs held steady despite the unfamiliar exercise. "He has been very patient with me. He knows quality when he carries it." Bennett took Phantom's reins and led him to a water trough. "Before we start working with him properly, let me show you the ranch. Marcus is away in Prescott on business, but he left word you were welcome." They walked through the ranch together, and Bennett proved to be an engaging guide. He showed her the breeding program that was producing some of the finest quarter horses in the territory, explained the challenges of raising cattle at this elevation, pointed out the irrigation system that kept the hay fields green, even in the driest months. "You know this place like you own it," Natalie observed as they paused by a fence overlooking a pasture full of mares and foals. "I have been here 5 years, since Marcus took a chance on a drifter with nothing but a good horse and a reputation for trouble." Bennett leaned on the fence rail, his eyes distant. "Before that, I moved around, never stayed anywhere long enough to call it home. What changed? I got tired of running." He turned to look at her, and the honesty in his face made her breath catch. "What about you? What made a Philadelphia schoolteacher come to a rough mining town in the Arizona territory?" She had told the sanitized version so many times it came easily. "I wanted a fresh start, an adventure." And the real reason, how did he see through her so easily? Natalie looked out at the horses, watching a foal nurse from its mother with single-minded focus. "My father died owing money to men who do not forgive debts. They were willing to accept alternative payment. I had a cousin who was a missionary out west, and she helped me get the teaching position. I left Philadelphia the night before the creditors came to collect." Bennett's jaw tightened. "They would have forced you into working off the debt. In a brothel, yes." She said it flatly, without emotion, though the fear of those final days in Philadelphia still haunted her dreams. "I got out. That is all that matters. It matters that you had to run, that men think they can trade in women's lives like poker chips." His voice was hard with anger but not directed at her. "You were right to leave. Brave, too." "I was terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs doing even when you are scared senseless." He pushed away from the fence and offered his hand. "Come on, let's teach you to really ride." The next few hours were a revelation. Bennett was a patient teacher, correcting her seat and hand position with gentle firmness. He taught her how to communicate with Phantom through subtle shifts of weight and pressure, how to read the horse's body language, how to move as one with the animal rather than fighting against him. "You are thinking too much," Bennett said, as she tried to guide Phantom through a series of turns. "Trust your instincts, trust him. What if my instincts are wrong? Then you will learn and adjust, but you cannot live afraid of making mistakes." He walked closer, standing beside Phantom's shoulder. "May I?" At her nod, he reached up and adjusted her grip on the reins, his hands warm and calloused against hers. "Feel that? Lighter. You are trying to control him, but what you want is to guide him. There is a difference." His touch lingered a moment longer than necessary, and when she looked down at him, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Like this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just like that." He stepped back, breaking the spell. "Now try the pattern again." This time, when she asked Phantom to turn, the horse responded smoothly, flowing through the movements with an ease that made her laugh with delight. "It worked," Bennett grinned, and the expression transformed him from severe to boyish. "Told you. You just needed to get out of your own way." They worked until the sun climbed high and hot, and finally Bennett called a halt. "Enough for today. You will be sore tomorrow as it is." He helped her down, his hands spanning her waist, and for a moment they stood very close, her hands on his shoulders and his on her waist. Natalie could feel the heat of him through her dress, could smell leather and soap and something essentially male. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he must feel it. "Thank you," she managed, "for teaching me. Thank you for giving me a reason to." His thumb brushed against her waist just once, and then he released her and stepped back. "Come back next Sunday." "Yes." The word came without hesitation, without thought. "Yes, I will." As she rode back to town, Natalie could still feel the ghost of his touch, could still see the way he had looked at her like she was something rare and precious. Sarah had been right. Her heart was already involved, and she had no idea how to protect it. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that became the center of Natalie's existence. Monday through Saturday, she taught reading and arithmetic to the children of Williams, maintaining the proper demeanor expected of a schoolteacher. But Sundays belonged to the ranch, to Phantom, and to Bennett. Each week she grew more confident in the saddle, and each week Bennett taught her something new. How to gallop across open ground with the wind in her hair. How to read the land for water and shelter. How to handle Phantom when he spooked at a rattlesnake sunning itself on a rock. How to shoot a rifle well enough to hit a target at 50 yards. But more than the riding and shooting, they talked. Bennett told her about growing up in Texas, the son of a failed cotton farmer who drank himself to death when Bennett was 15. About the years he spent gambling and drifting, always one step ahead of trouble. About the night he had won Phantom in a poker game in Santa Fe, and decided the horse was a sign he needed to change his ways. In return, Natalie found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Her mother's death from consumption when Natalie was 12. Her father's slow descent into gambling and drinking as he tried to escape his grief. The humiliation of watching their possessions sold piece by piece. The terror of those final weeks in Philadelphia. "You survived," Bennett said one Sunday in late October as they sat by a creek, letting the horses drink. The cottonwoods were turning gold and the air carried the first hint of winter's approach. "More than that, you got yourself out and built a new life. That takes strength." "I ran away." "You escaped. Different thing entirely." He picked up a smooth stone and sent it skipping across the water. Running away is when you leave because you are too afraid to stay. Escaping is when staying would destroy you. You did what you had to do. She watched the ripples spread across the creek's surface. Do you ever regret the choices you made, the years you spent drifting, every day? His honesty surprised her, but regret without change is just self-pity. I cannot undo the past, but I can build something better now. Is that what you are doing here? Building something? He turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. I am starting to think so. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Natalie became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the way the autumn sunlight caught in his dark hair, of the strong lines of his face and the fullness of his mouth. Bennett leaned closer, and she knew he was going to kiss her. Her heart raced with anticipation and fear in equal measure. But before their lips could meet, a shout echoed from the direction of the ranch. They sprang apart, and Bennett was on his feet instantly, his hand going to where his gun usually hung before he remembered he had left it in the barn. Stay here, he ordered, but Natalie was already gathering Phantom's reins. Not a chance. They rode back to the ranch to find chaos. Men ran between the buildings and smoke poured from one of the smaller barns. The sound of horses screaming in terror cut through the afternoon air. Fire! Someone shouted. Fire in the east barn! Bennett was off his horse before Phantom fully stopped, sprinting toward the burning building. Natalie dismounted and ran after him, her skirts tangling around her legs. The scene was nightmarish. Flames licked up the barn's wooden walls, feeding on old timber and dry hay. Inside, horses shrieked and kicked at their stalls, maddened by smoke and fear. Bennett did not hesitate. He grabbed a bucket from the pump and doused himself with water, then plunged into the smoke-filled barn. Natalie's scream caught in her throat as he disappeared into the inferno. Get buckets! She shouted at the men standing frozen in shock. Form a line from the pump. Move! Her authoritative teacher's voice snapped them into action. Within seconds, they had organized a bucket brigade, passing water from the pump toward the fire. But Natalie knew it was not enough. The barn was old and dry, and the fire had too strong a hold. Bennett emerged from the smoke leading two terrified horses, their eyes rolling white with fear. He handed them off to waiting hands and immediately turned back toward the barn. 6 more inside, he shouted, his face black with soot. Without thinking, Natalie grabbed a bucket and dumped it over herself, the cold water shocking against her skin. She wrapped her shawl around her mouth and nose and ran into the barn before anyone could stop her. The smoke was so thick she could barely see. Heat pressed against her like a living thing, scorching her lungs with every breath. She heard Bennett coughing somewhere ahead and followed the sound, her hands outstretched. Natalie. His voice was hoarse with smoke and fury. Get out, not without you. She found him by touch, his arm solid beneath her hands. Where are the horses? He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the stalls. Together they worked, opening gates and driving panicked horses toward the door. The animals were mad with terror, and it took all their combined strength to force them into the smoke and out to safety. 4 horses out. 5. The heat was unbearable now, and overhead, timbers groaned with an ominous sound. 1 more, Bennett shouted. Young mare back corner. They found the horse cowering in the last stall, too terrified to move even with the gate open. Bennett grabbed a rope and fashioned a crude halter, but the mare reared and struck out with her hooves. She is too scared, Natalie coughed. We have to leave her. Not happening. Bennett dodged the flailing hooves and got the rope around the mare's neck. Help me pull. Above them, something cracked like a gunshot. Natalie looked up and saw a burning beam beginning to fall, right toward where Bennett stood with the mare. She did not think. She threw herself against him, knocking them both sideways. The beam crashed down exactly where he had been standing, sending up a shower of sparks and burning debris. Bennett grabbed her and the mare's rope, and together they ran for the door as the roof began to collapse behind them. They burst out into the daylight, coughing and choking, just as the entire structure folded in on itself with a roar like thunder. Hands grabbed them, pulling them away from the burning barn. Someone threw a blanket around Natalie's shoulders. Someone else pressed a ladle of water into her hands. She drank gratefully, her throat raw and burning. "You damned fool," Bennett rounded on her, his eyes blazing with anger and fear. "You could have been killed, so could you?" She was shaking now, shock setting in. "That beam would have crushed you. That is my job, my risk to take. You had no business being in there. I was not going to stand by and watch you die." They glared at each other, both black with soot and smoke, both trembling with adrenaline and emotion. Then Bennett grabbed her and pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Do not ever scare me like that again," he whispered into her hair. "I could not bear it." Natalie clutched at his shirt, her face pressed against his chest, feeling the rapid hammer of his heart. "Neither could I." They stood like that while the barn burned itself out, while the other ranch hands dealt with the frightened horses and checked for injuries. When they finally pulled apart, every man there was studiously looking elsewhere, giving them the illusion of privacy. "Come on," Bennett said quietly, taking her hand. "Let's get you cleaned up." He led her to the main house, into the kitchen where he pumped water into a basin and found clean cloths. With gentle hands, he wiped the soot from her face, his touch tender despite the anger still simmering in his eyes. "You should not have followed me in," he said again, but there was less heat in it now. "I know." She caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. "But I could not help it. The thought of losing you was unbearable." Bennett closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, the anger was gone, replaced by something that made her heart skip. "Natalie, I need to tell you something. I think I know." "No, you do not." He set down the cloth and took both her hands in his. "These past weeks with you, they have been the best of my life. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and you challenge me in ways I never expected. I know I am not much, just a ranch foreman with a past I am not proud of, but I am falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying in their vulnerability. Natalie felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "You are not just a ranch foreman," she said softly. "You are the man who taught me to ride, who listened to my stories without judgment, who makes me laugh and think and feel alive in ways I never have before. And I am falling in love with you too." Bennett's eyes searched hers, as if looking for doubt or hesitation. When he found none, he leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Natalie met him halfway, her eyes closing as his lips finally met hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Bennett's hand came up to cup her face, and Natalie wound her arms around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks. So have I. Good." He kissed her again, quick and sweet. "Because I plan on doing it a lot more." A throat cleared behind them, and they sprang apart to find Marcus Hendricks, the ranch owner, standing in the kitchen doorway. He was a man in his 50s, weathered and graying but still strong, and there was amusement in his eyes. "Glad to see you both survived," he said mildly. "Though I am not sure my barn did. Want to tell me what happened?" Bennett's demeanor shifted instantly, becoming professional. "Looks like it started in the tack room, sir. We are still investigating, but I suspect a lantern got knocked over. We got all the horses out. No injuries beyond some smoke inhalation. Thanks to both of you, from what I hear." Marcus looked at Natalie with new respect. "Takes guts to run into a burning building. I am grateful." "I was just helping," Natalie said, suddenly aware of how improper she must look, alone with Bennett in the ranch house, her dress soaked and ruined, her hair falling around her shoulders. "You were being a hero," Marcus corrected. "Both of you. Now, Bennett, I need you to organize the men to clear the debris once things cool down. We will rebuild, but we need to salvage what we can. And you, Miss Summers, should probably get back to town before dark. I will have one of the men escort you." "I will take her," Bennett said quickly. Marcus smiled. "I figured you would. Go on, both of you. We have this under control." The ride back to Williams was quiet, both of them processing what had happened and what they had confessed to each other. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost too beautiful for the day they had had. "This changes things," Bennett said finally as they approached the town limits. "I know. People will talk. A schoolteacher involved with a ranch hand. It will cause a scandal." Natalie thought of the disapproving looks she already received, the whispered comments about her poker playing and Sunday rides. Then she thought of how Bennett's kiss had made her feel, and the choice became easy. "Let them talk." He reined in his horse, reaching over to catch her hand. "Are you sure? I will not have you lose your position because of me. I am sure." She squeezed his fingers. "Besides, if they fire me, I will just have to find something else to do." "Maybe I will become a professional poker player," Bennett laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "You probably could. You have the face for it." "Is that a compliment?" "The highest. You are impossible to read when you want to be." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a gallantry that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. "Same time next Sunday. I will be there." As she rode into town alone, Natalie felt lighter than she had in years. Yes, there would be challenges ahead. Yes, loving Bennett Vale would complicate her carefully rebuilt life. But some things were worth the risk. Some things were worth betting everything on. The scandal, Natalie had anticipated, arrived by Wednesday. She heard the whispers as she walked to the schoolhouse, saw the way some mothers pulled their daughters closer as she passed. By Thursday, 3 sets of parents had withdrawn their children from her class. Friday afternoon, the school board summoned her to a meeting. There were 5 men on the board, all prominent citizens of Williams. They sat behind a long table in the town hall, their faces grave. Reverend Matthews was there, along with the mayor, the banker, the owner of the general store, and Dr. Harrison, the town physician. "Miss Summers," the mayor began, his voice carefully neutral, "we have received complaints about your conduct. I see." Natalie stood before them, her hands folded calmly despite the nerves churning in her stomach. "What specific complaints?" "That you gamble in saloons," Reverend Matthews said, his voice dripping with disapproval. "That you consort with rough men. That you spend your Sundays at Valley Ranch with Bennett Vale, unchaperoned. This behavior is unseemly for a woman in your position." "I played poker once, I won fairly, and I have not set foot in a saloon since," Natalie said evenly. "As for Bennett Vale, he has been teaching me to ride. There are always other ranch hands present. Nothing improper has occurred. It was not quite a lie, nothing improper by her standards anyway." She doubted the Reverend would agree. "Nevertheless," the banker interjected, "the perception of impropriety is nearly as damaging as the reality. We hired you to be a moral example to our children. Your current behavior calls your judgment into question." Dr. Harrison, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "May I ask a question, Miss Summers?" "Of course." Do you love him? Bennett Vale. The directness of the question caught her off guard. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, but the doctor's eyes were kind. Yes, she said simply. I do. And does he love you? He says he does. Then it seems to me the solution is simple. Dr. Harrison looked at his fellow board members. She should marry him. A married schoolteacher is perfectly respectable, even if her husband is a ranch foreman. That is assuming he would marry her, Reverend Matthews said stiffly. Men of his type often make promises they have no intention of keeping. Natalie felt anger flare hot in her chest. Bennett is twice the man you give him credit for. He is honest and hardworking and honorable. Just because he did not grow up in a fine house does not make him less worthy of respect. Easy, Miss Summers, the mayor said, though there was a hint of approval in his eyes. No one is questioning Mr. Vale's current character, but we do need to think of the children and the town's reputation. Dr. Harrison's suggestion has merit. Would Mr. Vale marry you if you asked? I do not know. We have not discussed it. Then perhaps you should. The mayor looked at the other board members. I propose we table this discussion for 2 weeks. That will give Miss Summers time to sort out her personal affairs. In the meantime, she will continue teaching and we will all exercise discretion in our gossip. Agreed. 3 of the men nodded. Reverend Matthews looked sour but did not object. 2 weeks then, the mayor said. Dismissed. Natalie walked out of the town hall with her head high, but inside, she was shaking. Marriage. She had not let herself think that far ahead, had been too caught up in the dizzy joy of falling in love to consider the practicalities. Did she want to marry Bennett? The question should have been complicated, but it was not. Yes, she wanted it with a clarity that surprised her, but did he want to marry her? That was a different question entirely. Saturday dragged interminably. Natalie taught her diminished class, conscious of the empty desks where students had been withdrawn. The children who remained seemed subdued, picking up on the tension without fully understanding it. When Sunday finally arrived, she rode to Valley Ranch with her heart in her throat. She found Bennett in the corral working with a young horse. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting with a smile that made her chest ache. You are early, he said, swinging down from the horse. Not that I am complaining. We need to talk. His smile faded. That is never a good way to start a conversation. She dismounted and led Phantom to the water trough, needing the activity to settle her nerves. The school board called me in on Friday. Parents have been complaining about my conduct, about us. Bennett's jaw tightened. I was afraid of this. They gave me 2 weeks to make myself respectable. She turned to face him, her heart hammering. They suggested I should marry you. The words hung between them, stark and awkward. Bennett went very still, his expression unreadable. And what did you say? His voice was carefully neutral. I said I did not know if you would want to marry me. Natalie took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Do you? Bennett looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then he said, not like this. It felt like a punch to the gut. Natalie nodded, fighting to keep her face composed. I understand. It is too soon and the circumstances are less than romantic. I should not have brought it up. No, wait. Bennett closed the distance between them, catching her hands. You misunderstand. I do want to marry you, Natalie. I have been thinking about it for weeks, imagining what it would be like to wake up next to you every morning to build a life together. But I will be damned if I let those hypocrites force you into it. Hope flickered back to life in her chest. So you do want to marry me? More than I have ever wanted anything. His thumbs rubbed circles on the backs of her hands. But when I ask you to be my wife, it is going to be because we both want it, not because some pompous board of men gave you an ultimatum. I will not have our marriage start as a way to salvage your reputation. Then when will you ask me? A slow smile spread across his face. "When I am ready. When I have a ring worthy of you and a future I can offer you. When I can do it properly." "I do not need proper," Natalie protested. "I need you. You deserve proper." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Trust me, Natalie, I have a plan. Can you share this plan? Not yet, but I promise you it will be worth the wait." He released her hands and stepped back. "In the meantime, we ride. I found a new trail up in the high country that I want to show you. The aspens are turning, and it is beautiful enough to make you forget about school boards and gossips." She wanted to press him, to demand answers and timelines, but something in his eyes made her hold back. Bennett was not a man who made promises lightly. If he said he had a plan, she believed him. "Lead the way, then." They rode north into the high country, climbing through ponderosa forests and open meadows until they reached a plateau where aspens grew in thick groves. Bennett had been right. The trees were magnificent, their leaves turned to shimmering gold that seemed to glow from within. The air was cool and thin, scented with the sharp sweetness of fall. They dismounted in a clearing beside a small lake that reflected the aspens and the deep blue sky. It was so peaceful that Natalie felt the tension of the past week begin to drain away. "How did you find this place?" she asked, sitting on a sun-warmed boulder. "Spent a lot of time wandering before I settled at Valley Ranch." Bennett sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Used to think I was looking for something, but I never knew what. Now I think maybe I was just waiting." "For what?" "For the right reason to stay." He turned to look at her. "For you." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. "I am glad you waited." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the wind ripple across the lake's surface. After a while, Bennett said, "Tell me about your dreams, what you want from life if you could have anything." Natalie considered the question carefully. "I want a home," she said finally. "Not just a building, but a place that is mine, where I belong. I want to teach, not because I have to, but because I love it. I want children someday and a partner who respects my mind as much as my heart. I want to feel safe." "You should have all of that." Bennett's voice was rough with emotion. "You deserve every bit of it. What about you? What do you want?" "I want to build something that lasts. I have spent my whole life moving from place to place, never putting down roots because I was afraid they would be torn up. But with you, I want to stay. I want a ranch of my own someday, a place where we can raise horses and children and grow old together. I want to be the kind of man you are proud to stand beside." "I am already proud of you." He shook his head. "I am a ranch foreman, Natalie. I live in a bunkhouse and own little more than my horse and saddle. That is not enough to offer a woman like you." "What if I think it is?" "Then you are either lying or you do not understand what you would be giving up." He stood and walked to the lake's edge, his shoulders tense. "You were raised in Philadelphia in a good family. You had education and culture and opportunities. Out here, married to me, you would have hard work and isolation and maybe never enough money. That is not the life you were meant for." Natalie rose and went to him, placing a hand on his arm. "The life I was meant for ended when my father died and creditors tried to sell me to a brothel. Everything since then has been a gift, a second chance. You are not taking me away from anything, Bennett. You are offering me everything I want." He turned to face her, his eyes dark with conflict. "What if I fail you? What if I cannot provide the way you deserve? Then we will fail together and figure it out." She reached up to cup his face, feeling the rasp of stubble against her palm. "I am not some fragile society lady who needs protecting from reality. I ran away from my old life with nothing but the clothes on my back. I taught myself to survive in a new place with new rules. I can handle whatever comes." "I know you can." He covered her hand with his. "That is what scares me. You are so strong you do not need me at all. But I want you." "Is that not enough?" Instead of answering, Bennett kissed her. It was different from their previous kisses, deeper and more urgent, as if he was trying to communicate everything he could not say in words. Natalie responded with equal fervor, pouring all her hope and love and determination into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Natalie said, her lips curving into a smile. "Because I love you just as terrifyingly much." They stayed in the high country until the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. On the ride back to the ranch, Bennett was quieter than usual, clearly lost in thought. Natalie did not press him, content to ride beside him and enjoy the comfortable silence they had developed. As they approached Valley Ranch, they saw unusual activity. Several horses were tied at the main house, and men moved between the buildings with purpose. "Something is happening," Bennett said, spurring his horse to a faster pace. They found Marcus Hendricks in the ranch office, bent over a map with several other ranchers Natalie recognized from town. All of them looked grim. "Bennett, good," Marcus said, looking up. "We have a problem. Cattle rustlers hit the Morrison place last night, made off with nearly 50 head. They are moving south, probably heading for the Mexico border." "How many men?" Morrison's hands tracked 6 riders, all armed, professional outfit from the look of it. Bennett studied the map, his expression hardening. "They will have to cross valley land if they are heading south. We can set up an ambush at Devil's Canyon, catch them in the Narrows." "That is what I was thinking." Marcus looked at the other ranchers. "We are forming a posse. Leave at first light should catch them within 2 days if we ride hard." "I am in," Bennett said without hesitation. Natalie's stomach clenched with fear, but she kept her face neutral. This was the reality of frontier life. Cattle rustling was not just theft. It could destroy a rancher's livelihood. Men had to defend what was theirs. The meeting broke up shortly after, the ranchers heading to their homes to prepare. Bennett walked Natalie outside, his face troubled. "I have to go," he said. "You understand that, right?" "Of course." She tried to smile. "Just come back safely." "I will." He pulled her close, heedless of who might see. "I promise I will come back to you. You better. We have plans to make." He kissed her then, long and sweet, as if memorizing the feel of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were intense. "When I get back, we are going to talk. Really talk about the future and what we both want. No more dancing around it. I will be waiting." She watched him ride back to the ranch house, her heart heavy with worry. The frontier was dangerous, and posses chasing armed rustlers even more so. But she could not ask him not to go, could not ask him to be anything other than the honorable man she had fallen in love with. The ride back to town was lonely. Natalie found herself praying to a God she was not sure she believed in, bargaining for Bennett's safe return. She would give up anything, she thought, if it meant he would come back unharmed. The next 2 days crawled past with agonizing slowness. Natalie taught her classes by rote, her mind always on Bennett and the posse. At night, she lay awake imagining all the things that could go wrong. Sarah tried to comfort her, bringing tea and company, but even her friend's presence could not ease the knot of anxiety in Natalie's chest. On the 3rd day, as she was dismissing her students, a rider galloped into town. Natalie ran outside with the children, her heart in her throat. "They are coming back," someone shouted. "The posse is returning." The whole town turned out to meet them, lining the main street as the riders came in. Natalie counted them frantically, relief flooding through her when she spotted Bennett near the front of the group. He was dirty and exhausted, but he was whole. Their eyes met across the crowd, and his face lit with a smile that made everything else fall away. The posse had been successful. They had caught the rustlers at Devil's Canyon, recovered the stolen cattle, and turned the thieves over to the territorial marshal. No one on the posse had been seriously injured, though Bennett had a bruise darkening his jaw and moved stiffly, suggesting other hurts he was not admitting to. Natalie wanted to run to him, but propriety held her back. She was the schoolteacher, and he was a ranch hand, and the whole town was watching. Instead, she waited as he handed off his horse and made his report to Marcus Hendricks. Finally, after what felt like hours, he made his way to where she stood at the edge of the crowd. "Hello," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Hello." She wanted to touch him, to reassure herself he was real and safe, but she kept her hands clasped tightly together. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. Few bruises, that is all." His eyes searched hers. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" She glanced around at the dispersing crowd. The sun was setting, painting Williams in golden light. The church. No one will be there at this hour. They walked to the small church at the edge of town, maintaining a careful distance between them. Inside, the building was cool and dim, smelling of candle wax and old wood. Sunlight streamed through the simple windows, painting patterns on the plank floors. Bennett removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I did a lot of thinking out there, tracking those rustlers, about what matters, about what I want from life. And I realized I have been a fool. I have been so focused on having enough to offer you, on being worthy, that I nearly missed the point entirely." He set his hat on a pew and took her hands. "You already know my worst. You know I was a gambler and a drifter, that I have no family and few prospects beyond what Marcus pays me. And you said you love me anyway." "I do." "Then I need to trust that. I need to trust you when you say I am enough." He took a shaky breath. "I do not have a ring yet. I do not have a house or much money saved. But I am asking anyway, because waiting for the perfect moment is just another way of being afraid." Natalie's heart began to race. "Bennett, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Natalie Summers, you are the bravest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You beat me at poker and stole my horse and captured my heart all in one night. You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe I can be better than I am. I love you with everything I have, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Natalie's vision. "You already deserve me, you stubborn man. And yes, I will marry you." Bennett surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around in a circle before setting her down and kissing her with a passion that made her head spin. She kissed him back with equal fervor, tasting dust and joy and promise. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Bennett said, "We should probably tell people before the gossips have a field day." "Tell them what, exactly? We still have not worked out any details." "Details are easy." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch infinitely gentle. "We get married as soon as Reverend Matthews can arrange it. You keep teaching for as long as you want. We find a place to live, probably rent at first until I can save enough for land of our own. We build a life together one day at a time." "That sounds perfect." Natalie rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "When did you become such a planner?" "When I realized I had something worth planning for." They stayed in the church until full dark, talking through the practicalities and the dreams, making promises and plans. When they finally emerged, the town was quiet, most people already home for the night. Bennett walked her to her room above the general store, and at the base of the stairs, he kissed her one more time. "I will talk to Reverend Matthews first thing in the morning, unless you want a big wedding with all the trimmings. I want to marry you. Everything else is just details." "Good. Because I am not sure I can wait much longer to call you my wife." Natalie climbed the stairs feeling like she was floating. She had come to Williams to escape her past, never imagining she might find a future worth having. But here she was, engaged to a man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. Sarah was waiting when Natalie entered her room, sitting on the narrow bed with an expectant expression. "Well, what happened?" he asked me to marry him. Sarah squealed and pulled Natalie into a hug. "I knew it. I knew he would. Oh, Natalie, I am so happy for you. Thank you." Natalie laughed, returning the embrace. "I can hardly believe it is real. When is the wedding?" "As soon as possible, apparently. Neither of us wants to wait. Then we have work to do." Sarah's eyes gleamed with excitement. "You will need a dress and flowers, and we should plan a celebration. Oh, this is going to be wonderful." Natalie let her friend's enthusiasm wash over her, grateful for Sarah's presence in her life. She had come west alone, but she had found family in the most unexpected places. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Reverend Matthews, for all his disapproval of their courtship, seemed pleased to be officiating the wedding. He scheduled it for the following Saturday, giving them barely 8 days to prepare. The school board, relieved that scandal had been averted, reinstated the withdrawn students and offered Natalie their grudging approval. Dr. Harrison stopped by the schoolhouse to congratulate her personally. "I thought you might make a match of it," he said with a knowing smile. "Bennett is a good man. He will treat you right. I know he will. And if he does not, you come see me. I will set him straight." Sarah proved to be a force of nature when it came to wedding planning. She enlisted the help of several other women in town, and together they transformed Natalie's simple blue dress into something approaching wedding finery, adding lace and tucks until it was almost unrecognizable. Bennett, meanwhile, was making his own preparations. He spoke with Marcus Hendricks about housing, and the ranch owner offered them the use of a small cabin on valley land, rent-free for the first year as a wedding present. It was modest but sound, with 2 rooms and a stone fireplace. "It is not much," Bennett said when he brought Natalie to see it. "But it is a start. We can add on as we need to." Natalie walked through the little cabin, imagining their life there, a table by the window where she could grade papers, a bed in the corner covered with quilts, shelves for books, hooks for coats and hats, a home. "It is perfect," she said, meaning it. "It is ours." On the morning of the wedding, Natalie woke before dawn, too excited to sleep. Sarah helped her dress, pinning up her hair with wildflowers they had gathered the day before. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, her eyes shining with tears. "Bennett is a lucky man. I am the lucky one." They walked to the church together, and Natalie felt her heart swell at the sight of the people gathered outside. It seemed like half the town had turned out, more support than she had expected given the scandal of a few weeks ago. Inside the church, Bennett waited at the altar. He wore a new shirt and his best pants, his hair freshly cut and his face shaved smooth. But it was his eyes that caught her, dark and intense and full of love. Natalie walked down the aisle alone, needing no one to give her away. She was her own woman, making her own choice, and that felt right. When she reached Bennett's side, he took her hand and whispered, "You are so beautiful." "So are you." Reverend Matthews cleared his throat, clearly disapproving of their whispering, and began the ceremony. Natalie barely heard the words, too focused on Bennett's face, on the way he was looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had never thought to speak. When it came time for the vows, Bennett's voice was strong and clear. "I, Bennett Vale, take you, Natalie Summers, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to be worthy of the trust you place in me, and to spend my life making you happy. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Natalie's voice shook slightly, but her words were no less sincere. I, Natalie Summers, take you, Bennett Vale, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, respect you, and build a life with you. I promise to be your partner in all things, and to never stop believing in the man you are. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, and Bennett kissed her with a sweetness that made her heart ache. The church erupted in applause and cheers, but Natalie only heard Bennett's whispered words against her lips. "Mine. Finally mine." "Yours," she agreed. "Always yours." The celebration afterwards was held at the Valley Ranch, Marcus Hendricks insisting on hosting. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food contributed by half the town. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was dancing under the early evening stars. Natalie danced with Bennett, with Marcus, with Dr. Harrison, and even Reverend Matthews. She danced until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. But the best dance was the last one, when the stars were bright overhead and most of the guests had gone home, when it was just her and Bennett swaying to music only they could hear. "Happy?" he asked, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Happier than I knew I could be." "Good, because I plan on spending the rest of our lives keeping you that way." They walked to their cabin through the moonlit night, and Bennett carried her over the threshold with a care that made her laugh. He set her down gently, then lit the lamps to reveal the space transformed. Someone had been there while they were at the celebration, had made up the bed with fresh linens and left wildflowers in jars on the table and windowsill. "Sarah," Natalie guessed. "She has been planning this for days." "Remind me to thank her." Bennett pulled her close, his hand spanning her waist. "But right now I just want to be alone with my wife." The word sent a thrill through her. Wife. She was someone's wife, and that someone was the man she loved more than she had known it was possible to love another person. "Then we should not waste any more time talking," she said, and pulled him down for a kiss. Their first night together was tender and awkward and perfect all at once. Bennett was gentle, mindful of her inexperience, and Natalie felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Afterwards, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, she felt completely at peace. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down gambler. You are not broken. You are exactly who you are supposed to be. Then I am the luckiest man alive." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Natalie woke in the gray light before dawn, she lay quietly for a moment, listening to Bennett's steady breathing. This was her life now. This man, this home, this future they would build together. It was more than she had dared to hope for. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Bennett left for work at Valley Ranch before dawn and returned after dark, and Natalie continued teaching at the schoolhouse in town. They saw each other for precious few hours each day, but those hours were treasured. On Sundays, they rode together, exploring the country around Williams and slowly building their herd of horses. Bennett had dreams of breeding quarter horses, and Natalie helped him research bloodlines and plan for the future. Winter came early that year, bringing snow that turned the high country into a wonderland of white. The cabin was cozy and warm, and Natalie found she loved the evenings by the fire, grading papers while Bennett worked on tack or read aloud from the books she borrowed from the traveling library. In February, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She sat with the knowledge for a week before telling Bennett, wanting to be certain. When she finally shared the news, he swept her into his arms with a whoop of joy that probably could be heard back at the ranch. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Natalie asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy, Natalie, I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I can say." He kissed her forehead. You are going to be an amazing mother, and you will be an amazing father. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Natalie had to stop teaching in May when her condition became too obvious to hide. She spent her days at the cabin, sewing baby clothes and preparing for the arrival that was still months away. Bennett became even more protective, worrying over every twinge and ache. Dr. Harrison visited regularly, assuring them both that everything was proceeding normally. "First babies take their time," he said during one visit. "Could be late October, early November before this little one arrives. Just take it easy and let your body do what it knows how to do." In August, Marcus Hendricks made Bennett an offer that would change their lives. The ranch was expanding, and Marcus wanted to divide the operation into two parts. He offered Bennett a partnership in the horse breeding division, along with 200 acres of valley land to use as he saw fit. "I am getting old," Marcus said. "Need someone I can trust to take over when I am gone. You have proven yourself a dozen times over, Bennett. This ranch should be yours someday." Bennett was overwhelmed, barely able to speak. That night, he and Natalie stayed up late talking through the implications. "This is everything you dreamed of," Natalie said, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "Your own land, your own herd, a real future." "Our future," Bennett corrected. "None of this means anything without you." He placed his hand over hers, feeling their baby kick beneath their palms. "The three of us, we are going to build something that lasts, something we can pass down to this little one and any brothers or sisters that come after. It is more than I ever hoped for. Good, because I plan on giving you even more than that." Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving 3 weeks early but healthy and strong. Dr. Harrison delivered him in their cabin while Bennett paced outside, driven from the room by the doctor's insistence that he would only be in the way. When it was finally over, when Dr. Harrison opened the door and told him he had a son, Bennett rushed inside to find Natalie exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. Bennett approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the red, squalling infant. His son. His and Natalie's. The reality of it hit him like a physical blow. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He has your eyes. And your stubbornness from the sound of those lungs." Bennett sat carefully on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arm around Natalie and their son. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision. But now, looking at the baby's face, Natalie said, "Benjamin, for new beginnings. Benjamin Vale." Bennett tried it out, liking the sound. "Welcome to the world, Ben." The baby stopped crying at the sound of his father's voice, his unfocused eyes seeming to search for the source of the sound. Bennett felt something in his chest crack open, a well of love so deep it frightened him. "I will keep you safe," he promised his son. "Both of you, whatever it takes." "I know you will," Natalie said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You are the most honorable man I know." The first year of Benjamin's life was exhausting and joyful in equal measure. Natalie navigated new motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, though there were nights when she cried from sheer exhaustion. Bennett helped as much as he could, taking the baby for walks when he would not settle, changing diapers and pacing the floor at 2 in the morning. Through it all, their love deepened. They learned to communicate in glances and touches, to work as a team in managing the demands of a newborn and a growing horse operation. By the time Benjamin was walking, Bennett and Natalie had built their herd to 20 horses. They had added on to the cabin, creating a separate bedroom for their son and expanding the main room. The operation was small but profitable, and Bennett's partnership with Marcus was working better than anyone had hoped. On a warm evening in September, 2 years after their wedding, Natalie and Bennett sat on the porch of their cabin watching Benjamin toddle around the yard. The sun was setting behind the western peaks, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Bennett asked. Natalie considered the question. "Sometimes I miss the libraries and the theater, the culture. But no, I do not miss the life I had there. This is where I belong, even with all the hard work and isolation, especially with those things." She reached over and took his hand. "This life is real in a way my old life never was. Everything we have, we built together. That matters. I am glad you feel that way." Bennett squeezed her fingers. "Because I have been thinking about expanding the operation even more. Maybe buying that land adjacent to our section, the 100 acres with the creek running through it. It would give us room to grow, maybe build a proper barn and arena. Can we afford it? With what we have saved and what Marcus is willing to loan us, yes. It would be tight for a few years, but I think we can make it work." He turned to look at her. "But I will not do it without your agreement. This is our decision, not just mine." Natalie thought about it, watching Benjamin chase a butterfly across the yard. More land meant more work, more risk. But it also meant security, a legacy they could pass down to their children. "Let's do it," she said. "Let's build something that will last." Bennett grinned and pulled her close for a kiss. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in at least 3 hours. Then I am overdue." "I love you, Natalie Vale. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than Phantom." "Well," Bennett said thoughtfully, "that is a close call." She laughed and swatted his arm, and he caught her hand and kissed it. Benjamin looked up at the sound of their laughter and came running over on unsteady legs, demanding to be picked up. Bennett scooped him up with one arm, keeping the other around Natalie. "Look at that sunset, Ben," he said, pointing west. "That is your land you are looking at. Yours and your mother's and mine. We are building something here, something that will be yours someday." Benjamin was more interested in grabbing his father's hat than the sunset, but Natalie felt the truth of Bennett's words settle into her bones. They were building something that would last, something that mattered. 3 years later, their daughter was born. They named her Caroline, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. Benjamin, now 4, was entranced by his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to feeding. The horse operation continued to thrive. Bennett's quarter horses were gaining a reputation throughout the territory for their speed and intelligence. Buyers came from as far as California to purchase horses from the Vale Ranch. Natalie started teaching again, this time holding classes in a room they built onto the barn. Several families in the area were grateful to have education for their children without the long ride into Williams. She taught reading and arithmetic and history, and she loved every minute of it. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Benjamin grew into a thoughtful boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Caroline was fearless, climbing trees and riding before she could barely walk. A second son, Daniel, arrived when Caroline was 3, completing their family. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Bennett took Natalie riding up to the high country lake where he had once told her his dreams. It was September again, the aspens turning gold just as they had that first time. They dismounted and sat on the same sun-warmed boulder, watching the wind ripple across the water. "You remember what we talked about here?" Bennett asked. "You told me you wanted to build something that would last, a ranch of your own, a place to grow old together. And you said you wanted a home, a place where you belonged." "I remember." Bennett pulled something from his pocket, a small box worn smooth with handling. "I have been carrying this around for months, waiting for the right moment. Figured our anniversary, in the place where I first told you I loved you, that is about as right as it gets." Natalie opened the box to find a ring, a simple gold band set with a small diamond that caught the sunlight and threw rainbows. "I know I should have given you this 10 years ago before we got married," Bennett said. "But back then I could not afford it. Now I can, and I wanted you to have something that shows the world how much you mean to me." Tears blurred Natalie's vision as Bennett took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger, next to the plain gold band she had worn for a decade. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you." He cupped her face in his hands. "These past 10 years have been the best of my life. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to be better than I was. I wake up every morning grateful that you took a chance on a broken-down gambler in a Williams saloon. You were never broken. You were just waiting for the right moment to become who you were meant to be." She covered his hands with hers. "And I would take that chance again, 1,000 times over. You are my home, Bennett. You and our children and this life we built together. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." They kissed as the aspens whispered around them and the lake reflected the endless blue sky. 10 years ago, Natalie had beaten a cowboy at poker and won more than just a horse. She had won a future, a love, a life worth living, and she would bet everything she had that the best was yet to come. 20 years after that night in the Lucky Dollar Saloon, Natalie stood on the porch of the home they had built, watching the sun rise over Vale Ranch. It was still the same land Bennett had partnered on with Marcus Hendricks all those years ago, but it was wholly theirs now. Marcus had passed 5 years prior, leaving his portion of the ranch to Bennett in his will. The original cabin was now the ranch office. The house where Natalie stood was a sprawling structure of timber and stone, with enough bedrooms for their 3 children and the grandchildren who visited regularly. Benjamin was married now, living on the northern section of the ranch with his wife and 2 daughters. Caroline, married to a veterinarian from Flagstaff, visited often with her young son. Only Daniel still lived at home, though at 18 he was talking about joining his brother in the horse breeding business. The ranch employed 12 hands year-round and twice that during busy seasons. Vale quarter horses were known throughout the Southwest, and Bennett had recently been invited to judge at a prestigious show in San Francisco. Natalie heard footsteps behind her and felt Bennett's arms wrap around her waist. Even after 30 years, his touch still made her heart skip. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured against her ear. "Morning, yourself." She leaned back against his chest. "Did you sleep well? Better than I did at 25, worse than I did at 30. He rested his chin on top of her head. "Getting old is not for the faint of heart. We are not old. We are seasoned. Is that what we are calling it?" But she could hear the smile in his voice. They stood together watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. From the barn, they could hear Daniel working with the horses, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Somewhere a rooster crowed and in the distance cattle lowed. "We did it," Natalie said softly. "We built something that lasted. We did more than that. We built something beautiful." Bennett turned her in his arms so she faced him. His hair was more silver than brown now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes were still the same dark, intense gaze that had first captured her attention 3 decades ago. "And it all started because a brave woman from Philadelphia beat me at poker 3 hands straight. Best game I ever played. Best loss I ever took," he kissed her forehead. "I love you, Natalie Vale, today and every day for the rest of our lives. I love you too." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the familiar roughness of his jaw beneath her palm. "Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for taking a chance on me when I did not deserve it. You always deserved it. You just did not know it yet." They went inside together as the sun climbed higher. ready to face another day of work and family, and the thousand small joys that made up a life well lived. The ranch would continue to grow and change. Children would grow up and have children of their own. But this love, this partnership, this was the foundation that held everything together. And it had all started with a poker game and a cowboy who had asked what else she could win from him. The answer, Natalie thought as Bennett poured coffee and they sat down to breakfast, was everything. She had won everything that mattered. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. Their grandchildren loved to hear about the night Grandma beat Grandpa at poker, about the burning barn and the proposal in the church and the cabin that became a ranch. But the real story, Natalie thought, was not in the dramatic moments. It was in the quiet ones. The morning coffees shared in comfortable silence. The way Bennett still reached for her hand when they walked. The life they had built together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, always choosing each other. That was the real prize. Not the ranch or the horses or the success they had achieved. The real prize was the man who still looked at her like she was the best thing he had ever seen, and the life they had created from nothing but love and determination, and a willingness to take a chance on each other. She had come west with nothing, running from a past that threatened to destroy her. She had found a future beyond anything she could have imagined, and all because she had been brave enough to sit down at a poker table and play her hand for all it was worth. In the end, the biggest gamble of her life had paid off beyond measure. She had bet on love, on possibility, on a cowboy with dark eyes and a generous heart, and she had won everything.